Joining me in the studio, political commentator David Cogan. Good to see you, David. Former Conservative advisor Charlie Rowley. Lovely to have you here. And veteran political journalist Adam Boulton. Why you're more of a veteran than anyone else, I really don't know. You look like a spring chicken to me. But let me ask you, A, how surprised stroke shocked you were by this choice, and B, why you think he's done it?
Well, I certainly didn't know or think it was in the offing. I did know that David Cameron was at a bit of a loose end. His business ventures, we've talked about Lex Greensill, that went wrong. He also had a China investment fund, which he had to close. And unlike Nick Clegg or George Osborne or William Hague, he hasn't really found a second act in his life. And bringing him in does at least put a credible, known international figure at the negotiating table. And it's quite clear there are going to have to be negotiations on Ukraine and the future of Palestine-Israel, as well, international negotiations. And I think he possibly will be a more credible figure in that role, particularly since in the House of Lords, he's not going to be involved in the nitty-gritty. But of course, the downside is we, the public, may think, well, OK, fairly sensible choice. In the Conservative Party, for a large section, it's red rag to a bull because he's a Remainer. There are now 2 out of 4 Remainers in the top job with Jeremy Hunt. You know, Rishi Sunak was saying at the party conference, I'm the change candidate. Now he's brought back someone from the past. I mean, some people are saying it's not just scraping the bottom out of the barrel, it's actually going to the dump to get a barrel you've already thrown away.
Well, that's not a very polite way of describing David Cameron, but nevertheless, David Cogan, I mean, you're smiling, but is this something to smile at, or is it so farcical you can't help laughing, or is it just a paucity of inspiration? You have to start recycling old prime ministers because you just can't find anyone else who could possibly take the gig? What the heck is happening here?
Well, it'd be a very good thing if Rishi Sunak is going to recycle so many ex-prime ministers because he's got so many to choose from.
There's so many. That
I mean, he could
line
actually
that the
do half the
Senate
cabinet with ex-prime ministers. I think the thing about David Cameron, and just picking on what Adam's saying there, is, of course, that's all well and good. He is a known international figure. The problem is, if you look at his track record as prime minister in international affairs, it was all disastrously badly known. He goes into Libya on an ill-fated campaign that was described in very rude terms by the then American president. He tried to get involved in Syria and failed to do so. And he then decided, with the kind of complete confidence and incompetence that only a Tory Prime Minister of the day could manage, to do Brexit, thinking he could walk it in the referendum against the advice of his then Chancellor and the advice of half the Tory party. And of course, he lost it. And when he lost it, instead of owning the problem, instead of actually standing there and showing some grit and trying to deal with it, he walks away, he flounces off in 24 hours. So if that makes a good foreign minister, I've got a foreign secretary of state, terrific. Bring back, Fluffy Bunny to do it. But I'm afraid, I don't think for the Labour Party, they're going to remind everybody about his domestic record. For everybody else, they're going to if they remember who he is and they look at his record, it's not a good one. And it probably appeases some wing of the Tory party, but it does no more than that.
Charlie, why didn't he choose John Major? He was looking very healthy and full of beans at the Cenotaph, wasn't he, really? He would have done a better job, wouldn't he, or could possibly have done?
Well, I think John Major's probably still enjoying retirement and the cricket and the occasional pint, I should imagine. But
going to the opera with Norma, but he might be at a loose end too. I mean, anyone at a loose end should have signed up or at least put their names in the hat, surely.
Well, I think the thing about David Cameron is that he has... he led the country during a very, very difficult time. It was austere times, economic downturn. Economic downturn. But he was able to communicate to the country why those difficult decisions had to be taken, why public finances had to be curtailed or cut in a particular way. And he went on to win a general election in 2015 after leading a coalition. So as a communicator, I think he's first class. I think he's obviously, as I say, won a general election against a difficult backdrop. All of those, I think, put together, and with all the international experiences being a former Prime Minister, will be of benefit to the current Prime Minister, and he'll be an absolute great man to have around the cabinet table, I would have thought.
But will he be of benefit to the current Prime Minister? Because, Adam, isn't it a bit kind of King Learish in that, he didn't, as David quite rightly said, even stick around to try to do anything to sweep up the mess that largely was of his own creation because he misjudged the referendum result. He just, he said flounced off. I think earlier in the show I said, he basically big girls bloused it. He just left.
Yeah, but
he just said, I'm not doing this, bye. And he went. But might he not, however, tread upon the toes of Rishi?
Well,
how do you work with a former Prime Minister if you're a Prime Minister?
Well, I think from his point of view, he would actually see this as an opportunity to make recompense, if you like, for walking away after Brexit. And he's now involved. It's accepted that Brexit has happened and he'll have to deal with that. And of course, it's important to remember that he is going to be a deputy, a number 2 on foreign policy. Foreign policy in the UK is very much decided from Downing Street. Yeah. And then the Foreign Secretary goes out to sell it in that level. I agree with everything David said about his foreign policy as Prime Minister, but this time around it's not going to be his foreign policy. It's going to be him in a position to offer advice. And I don't think he represents a threat to Rishi Sunak. I mean, that's one of the interesting things. I mean, James Cleverly was the most popular person in a poll of Tory party membership in the cabinet. He's now been moved to a traditional poison chalice of the Home Office. So maybe in that move, there's a certain extent of Rishi Sunak covering his back, because Home Secretaries don't tend to prosper and go on and become Prime Ministers.
No. And David, I mean, just watching this unfurling, these names are being suddenly evoked. The name of Esther McVey, I don't know whether it sent shudders through present company or you were just so excited you began trembling. I don't know what happened, but certainly something happened when we heard that name. All sorts of bods are just kind of suddenly appearing back on the chessboard.
Doesn't Esther McVey now have some sort of television show?
Yeah, she's got
maybe they're just putting back former Conservative politicians who are doing television shows. I can't imagine who else that might include. But the fact is, I think the thing we haven't mentioned, of course, is what started today, and it's been a long day, yes, which is the decapitation of Suella Braverman, for which I think we should all give praise. I mean, possibly the most disastrous holder of that office of state in the history of that office of state, and certainly the most disastrous member of the cabinet.
Adam Cameron's already done one useful job in as much as we're talking about him rather than Suella Braverman.
Yes, quite.
Exactly. I know, I'm sorry to drag her back in. I shouldn't have done it. But I mean, the fact is that, well, actually, if this is the cabinet that's going into the next election, and one presumes it must be, with only a year or so to go to the next election, I guess if I were a Conservative, what I'd be pointing to is, you've got Jeremy Hunt, who's clearly a competent Chancellor with a lousy deck of cards. You've got Cameron, who at least can appear to be a competent Foreign Secretary. Cleverly, who, by the way, I think his reputation has been enhanced at the Foreign Office, and certainly to General... And, Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister. So you could see why this is seen as a solid team up against Labour. From the Labour perspective, which obviously is the one that I keep half an eye on, I mean, I think... David Cameron is actually, frankly, a relatively easy target. It doesn't change the political dynamics of Labour still being 20 points ahead in the polls. There's a year to go. There's policy to be developed. And politics will revert to its normal state in about, 6 hours' time. So, it's been fun having David Cameron and Suella Braverman being removed, but I'm not sure actually it changes the political equation.
Unless it does, Charlie, unless what's really going to happen now is the wooing back of the South, the wavering South, so the strong Tory heartland, where there used to be no question whatsoever about what the election result would be, suddenly or gradually, or I don't know, whichever way you want to put it, the loyalties were being sorely tested and the umbilical cord was being severed. And now Cameron's back. Maybe the South will re-embrace their party.
I think that's right. And I think, look, in order to win general elections, you've got to hold the middle ground. You've got to hold the centre ground. And I think what Suella was doing was clearly going far too far in some of the language that she used. It was clearly becoming quite divisive. It was, the idea to allow the narrative to become the nasty party, which was never quoted, I don't think, anyway. But, the idea that is something that was penetrating through the newspapers and into the public domain in the run-up to a general election is not a place any political party wants to be. So to get rid of her, I think, was the right thing to do.
But you've still got to straddle. That's the problem. Because, OK, David Cameron may be darling of the southern, southern soft shires. But then, new party chairman, anybody? Richard Holden.
Yes, just tell us about Richard Holden, who was formerly...
MP for North West Durham.
And also a kind of press guy and a PR fellow and so that kind of...
But a classic red wall seat, which he holds with only 1,000 votes. It's been Labour before then. Esther McVey, another outspoken northern Brexiteer. I mean, what's the message he's trying to send out? from this? Is it to try and bring back...
Charlie, what's the message you want?
A one-nation party, a one-nation government.
party.
There's a one-nation party is kind of... You've got people in the Red Wall, you've got people from the north, you've got people from all kinds of backgrounds.
You really think...
The Conservative Party is a huge breadth of
I must say, Charlie,
I've
listened to you about 3 times when you and I have been on this show together, and you do a great job of coming up with but the idea that the Conservative Party could be presented as a one-nation party after the last few years is truly entertaining. I mean, the fact is that, you know, there's policy here. I mean, Rishi Sunak's policy now, which is absolutely committed to an anti-climate change agenda, when it plays in the southeast and southwest, if you're a Lib Dems, I don't think David Cameron changes the calculus that the Lib Dems have got a real ability to attack the Conservative Party over climate and over a whole range of other policies, and Labour is going to take them on everywhere else. And that doesn't make you a one-nation party. It makes you, as Adam says, a split party into different groupings that have completely contradictory agendas. And I don't think today's reshuffle particularly addresses that.
Because the other thing, of course, is what are the people who around Suella Braverman going to do now? She makes no secret of her ambition. They're meeting in Parliament this afternoon. There's even some talk of, you know, the old cliche of sending in the signatures and having a vote of confidence and all that. So in that sense, it's not going to be a party coming together as one nation at all, is it?
Well, I think...
Any chance of that, though, the sending in of signatures?
I would...
ousting?
If Suella has any leadership ambitions, which I think we all think that she does, then I think she'd be wise to hold any kind of fire, because nobody likes to be the one that actually brings down the current team. And I think that would do her a disservice, actually, within the membership, of which a number of people do support her. So I think she would just have to be slightly more tactile. She'll obviously be important from the backbenches because she's a darling of the right wing of the Conservative Party, and that does tend to be the membership of the Conservative Party. So she has to play it right. Just the very mention of Suella Braverman. And,
the lights came down.
The lights came down. That was most eerie. That was very panto effect. I'm going to pretend we did that on purpose. I'm not sure that we did. I'm going to pretend that we did.